Becoming Cousteau. For the younger generation that might not know who Jacques Cousteau was, he had a show called The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau that introduced a lot of the older generation to the world under the water. During the generation that was obsessed with getting to space and exploring the stars, nobody was really exploring under the water. That's something he was always drawn to, though. From a young age, would talk about the fact that he had seawater in his veins instead of blood. I think that truly described who he really was. In his adventure to try to explore what had never been explored before, he became not just an explorer, but a scientist, an inventor. His designs have completely revolutionized scuba diving for both personal and military use. In his early days of the Calypso, which was his vessel, his endeavors with the oil companies actually led to the United Arab Emirates being as well-to-do as it is today. It all went back to Jacques Cousteau and his ability to help these companies get down to the oil that was in the sea floor. Now, doing this, he had no idea of the ramifications that would come from this. He literally, over time, would realize that the silent world underwater was screaming for help. He decided to take his knowledge of what he had learned under the water, and his notebook became his camera. He was not a big fan of documentaries because he just didn't like how they were presented almost in a condescending way to people. And so that's one thing he really tried to make sure that he never did, was to kind of have that attitude. He truly became an oceanaut. We are familiar with astronauts, but oceanauts, that is a term, I don't know if he coined that himself, but if he had of, it would not have surprised me. He decided to try to take his knowledge and try to apply it to preserve the beautiful things that he was seeing, at least from his perspective. And though his experiences have led to the Cousteau Society, the Earth Summit, to him being probably the first Captain Planet, he just had an impact that wouldn't truly be understood for many years. He loved his family, but I think he loved the sea just a little bit more. Now, I don't mean to take away from any of his family members the relationships that they had with that. It's just no matter what he did with his family, everything always came back to the water. His children at boarding school, when they would be on their breaks, they would come to the Calypso. His first wife was the stewardess on the Calypso, and behind the scenes, she kind of kept everything together. Even as her health declined in the years prior to her death, she never let on to anyone because she didn't want to disappoint him, and she didn't want to disappoint the Calypso or its crew. So she suffered in silence until her death. Even with his second marriage, everything always came back to the water. With the kids and just how his whole life played out, everything always came back to the sea. So beautiful, so serene, so dangerous. To try to describe the passion that he had for what he did, I can't even find words. He changed the world. In doing so, it did get a little bit political towards the end, and he really tried to use his knowledge to try to influence politics, not for a particular country, but for the entire planet. In doing that, it definitely had its supporters as well as its opponents. In the insistence of these ideas pushed to the level that they were, it maybe went a little bit too far. Again, that's up for individual interpretation. It's easy to understand